Let's get a little more now on the situation in Gaza. The US military says a pier they built off the coast has resumed bringing humanitarian aid into the territory after being temporarily removed this week due to poor sea conditions. It's the latest setback to the $230 million project that was set up in mid-May.
Humanitarian groups have criticised the move to bring aid via sea, saying it draws attention away from tensions at the borders where aid still remains stalled. Alexnadra Saieh is head of humanitarian policy and advocacy from Save the Children, and she says the ability for humanitarian aid agencies to provide assistance has never been lower.
8 months into the war in Gaza, the humanitarian needs have never been bigger. Much of Gaza's infrastructure has been destroyed. Homes have been destroyed. Hospitals have been rendered essentially dysfunctional. Schools are being used to house displaced families. Families are fleeing for their lives and finding whatever they can get, many relying on just plastic sheeting just to provide them with shelter. It's just catastrophic. And we don't see a sign that the violence, that the bombardment is going to end anytime soon.
Alexnadra, just taking into consideration the devastation and what the people of Gaza are facing at the moment, the lack of humanitarian aid, of course, explain to us the role of how this temporary pier works in the aid distribution operation.
So this temporary pier or floating dock was essentially supposed to provide another entry point to get aid into the Gaza Strip. But the problem is that not only was the pier subjected to the same restrictions as the other entry points, the land crossings to bring in aid into Gaza, but it was also vulnerable to weather changes. And those factors made even aid being brought in from the pier, through the pier, unpredictable. And that's one of the problems. We have seen aid entering Gaza in an unpredictable fashion. Some days there's a little bit more aid than other times. Across the board, it has never been enough. And essentially, initiatives like this U.S. pier has basically represented a cosmetic change. It's provided a mirage of improved access when in reality, humanitarian needs inside the Strip have never been bigger, and the ability for humanitarian agencies to provide that assistance has never been lower.
All right, so it seems that because the crossings are closed and this pier is, well, you can't rely on it because of bad weather and poor sea. We know that the U.S. forces have also reverted to airdropping medical supplies and food into affected areas. We've also seen that that's just as ineffective.
Not only have the airdrops been ineffective, it's actually been dangerous. Several people have actually been hit by these airdrops and died or have been injured. And so as humanitarian agencies, we've continued to plead with governments to, instead of resorting to airdrops, use their diplomatic capital to get Israel to open all of the crossing points to get aid into Gaza. Not only that, but also achieve a ceasefire. One of the biggest obstacles that humanitarian organizations face in delivering humanitarian assistance is safety. More than 260 humanitarian aid workers have been killed in the last 8 months under Israeli bombardment. The majority are Palestinian, and it is just not safe. There have been several instances, including this week, where aid operations or areas around aid operations have been hit by fire. And this has depleted the capacity of organizations to respond. Just yesterday, there was an attack in a so-called safe area next to an ICRC facility where dozens of displaced families had been sheltering, and more than 20 people were killed. So under these conditions, it's just impossible to provide anything meaningful based on what the needs in Gaza are now.
Alexnadra, Doctors Without Borders says that it may have to either stop or reduce their humanitarian operations in Gaza because of the many obstacles that you've just outlined there. I wonder if this is something that Save the Children is also considering, given the challenges on the ground.
We are not considering reducing our operations, but it's very difficult to do what we need to do under the current conditions. Organizations like ours are constantly at risk of running out of supplies. In the past, when we've almost run out of supplies, we've tried to borrow from peer organizations, but that's not reliable. And every organization in Gaza is in the same boat. Water purification devices, medical kits, plenty of other essential material for an aid response have been either blocked from entering Gaza, or once it's entered Gaza, it's been difficult to distribute it because there's been constant bombardment. And so we haven't had our operations, we haven't been able to deconflict areas and guarantee safety for our staff members. And that's one of the biggest problems.